The monitoring station's soft blue glow illuminated Celia's scaled face as she adjusted her posture in the ergonomic chair designed for Azurian physiology. Most of her colleagues had left for their evening meal, leaving the outpost quiet except for the gentle hum of equipment. Just a few more minutes, she murmured to herself, antennae twitching as she ran another diagnostic on the long-range sensors. Outpost Epsilon was the definition of tedious, a career dead end where junior technicians were sent to be forgotten. The console suddenly pinged with an unexpected alert. Celia straightened, all four eyes widening as she examined the reading. "That can't be right," she whispered, six-fingered hands moving rapidly across the holographic interface. The signature was massive, a vessel larger than anything the Concordat had ever built, and it exhibited energy patterns that matched nothing in their extensive database. Even more puzzling, it seemed to be deliberately skirting the very edge of sensor range, as though testing their detection capabilities. Celia initiated a deeper scan, diverting power from other systems. The results made her heart race beneath her chest plates. The vessel contained weapon systems of incomprehensible power, yet displayed no known identification markers of any Concordat species. Krell needs to see this immediately, she decided, sending an urgent message to her supervisor. When the older Azurian finally arrived, his scales were darkened from interrupted sleep, and his annoyance was evident in the rapid clicking of his mandibles. "This had better be important. Junior technician," he grumbled, looming over her station. Celia displayed the scan results. "Unknown vessel, sir. Nothing like it in our records." Krell's irritation shifted to patronizing amusement. "Oh, Xylia, this is exactly why they assign rookies to Epsilon." He tapped several commands, dismissing her findings. Sensor ghost, obviously. Probably radiation from the nearby pulsar interfering with the array. "But sir, I've compensated for stellar radiation. The signature is..." "Enough," Krell interrupted. "Log it as an anomaly and reset the system. And next time, don't wake me unless there's an actual emergency." After he left, Celia stared at the readings, unwilling to dismiss them so easily. She saved a copy of the data to her personal device before reluctantly following protocol and resetting the system. Later that night, unable to sleep, she sat cross-legged on her sleeping platform, searching through historical archives. Most were publicly available, but some required creative access methods she'd learned from a Centaurian friend at the Academy. 3 hours into her search, she found it, fragmented records from before the Great Realignment, when the Concordat was still forming. There were references to a species called humans who had briefly interacted with the early Concordat before vanishing from galactic affairs after a catastrophic conflict known as the Severing War. The historical footage showed vessels with energy signatures remarkably similar to what she detected. According to the ancient texts, humans possessed technology centuries beyond other species, particularly in weaponry and propulsion. "But this can't be," Celia whispered to her empty quarters. "Humans are just stories used to frighten younglings." She'd grown up hearing tales of the dangerous humans, unpredictable beings who could adapt to any environment, devise solutions that defied conventional logic, and fight with unmatched ferocity. They were bogeymen, cautionary tales about the dangers of unchecked aggression and technological advancement. Yet the signature matched. The timing aligned with patrol patterns, and deep in classified archives, she found something even more startling. Periodic reports of unexplained phenomena along the border regions, stretching back decades. All dismissed, all buried in bureaucracy. When her next shift began, the signature had vanished without a trace. But Celia knew with absolute certainty something from beyond Concordat space was watching them. And if the legends contained even a kernel of truth, the galaxy might never be the same. 3 cycles passed with no further anomalous readings, but Celia couldn't forget what she'd seen. The mysterious signature haunted her thoughts during every shift. She'd reviewed the historical files dozens of times, committing the fragmented information about humans to memory. Maintenance check on the outer sensor array in Quadrant 7, she informed the duty officer, her voice carefully neutral as she signed out a small service vessel. The officer barely looked up from his console, waving her through with disinterest. Once cleared from the outpost, Celia punched in the coordinates she calculated based on the mysterious ship's trajectory. Her heart raced as she bypassed regular patrol routes, heading toward an unremarkable asteroid field at the edge of Azurian space. If I'm wrong, it's just a maintenance detour, she told herself. If I'm right. Her ship's sensors suddenly flickered and died. The engines cut out next, leaving her drifting in eerie silence. Panic rose in her throat as a massive shadow engulfed her vessel. Something impossibly large had appeared above her, its hull seemingly absorbing rather than reflecting light. Her vessel shuddered as an invisible force pulled it upward into a cavernous bay that dwarfed her tiny craft. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow inside her cabin as life support switched to backup power. Zilia's fingers trembled as she activated her personal recorder. This may be my final message. I've encountered what I believe to be a human vessel. If I don't return, tell the High Command that the legends. Her airlock hissed, interrupting her recording. She grabbed the standard-issue defense button, useless against advanced technology, but it provided some comfort. The beams that entered looked nothing like the monstrous creatures from children's stories. They stood on 2 legs with only 4 limbs total, so inefficient compared to Azurian physiology, and possessed strangely flat faces with forward-facing eyes. Their skin varied in shade from pale beige to deep brown, lacking the protective scales or carapace of most sentient species. I'm Captain Marcus Chen of the Earth Expeditionary Force Warship *Resilience*, said one in perfect Azurian, causing Celia's translator implant to spark in confusion. It wasn't translating. The being was actually speaking her language. How is this possible? She whispered. Humans are myths. The captain's mouth curved upward at the corners. I assure you, we're quite real. And you showed remarkable initiative tracking us down. Hours later, Celia stood in the ship's command center, surrounded by technology that made Concordat advancements look primitive. Breathtaking holographic displays showed hundreds of human vessels patrolling the edges of known space. We didn't vanish, explained Captain Chen as they walked past a wall of memorial plaques honoring generations of crews. We chose to become watchers from the shadows. He led her to a viewing port where stars stretched endlessly before them. After the Severing War, we realized our mere presence accelerated conflicts between younger species. Our technology, our methods of thinking, they were too disruptive to developing civilizations. So you've been here all along, Celia said, processing the revelation. Watching us. Protecting you, corrected a female human officer named Amara. Though you never knew you needed protection. Captain Chen's expression grew somber. We've maintained our vigil for 300 years, honoring the isolation accord our ancestors signed. But circumstances have changed. His eyes met Celia's with an intensity that made her step back. We have no choice but to return now. Why? Celia asked, though the gravity in the human's voice suggested she already knew the answer would be terrifying. Because something is coming, Chen said quietly. Something even we cannot fight alone. We call them Void Heralds, Lieutenant Amara Okafor explained, her dark fingers dancing across the control panel. The holographic display before it Celia shifted to show crystalline entities unlike anything she'd ever seen. Asymmetrical structures that seemed to phase between solid and energy states. The footage showed them approaching the small outpost on the edge of an unidentified system. This recording was taken 73 days ago. Amara continued. Watch what happens next. The crystalline forms surrounded the outpost. There was no weapon fire, no conventional attack. Instead, the structures began to pulse with increasing brightness. The outpost's lights flickered, then dimmed, then went dark. But the horror didn't end there. The very planet below began to lose its atmospheric glow, oceans dulling from vibrant blue to muddy gray. Within minutes, what had been a living world became a lifeless husk. "They consume everything," Captain Chen said quietly from behind her. "Energy in all its forms, electrical, thermal, even the background radiation of space itself. When they're finished, nothing remains but cold matter." Zilia's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, trying to process the implications. "But why haven't we detected them before?" "The Concordat has sensor arrays throughout the outer systems. Your technology can't detect their quantum signatures," explained an older human female who introduced herself as Dr. Eleanor Rice, the ship's chief scientist. "Humans developed the capability accidentally after the isolation. It's why we've been able to intercept their scouts for centuries." The display shifted again, showing grainy footage of human vessels engaged in battle with smaller versions of the crystal entities. "This is what we've been doing while your people fought us legends," Chen said without bitterness. "Fighting their advanced scouts, preventing them from establishing footholds within the galaxy. We've lost many ships and crews over the years." Zilia felt suddenly cold. "You've been protecting species that reduced you to cautionary tales." Chen shrugged. "It was our choice to disappear from galactic affairs. We couldn't blame others for how they remembered us." They moved through the ship to a massive chamber filled with plants from dozens of worlds, a hydroponics bay that provided food for the crew. The familiar scent of Azurian spring flowers caught Celia by surprise. "We try to keep a piece of every world we protect," Amara explained, noticing her reaction. "It reminds us what we're fighting for." Captain Chen stopped by a viewport, his silhouette framed against the starfield. "Our analysts believe this isn't just another scouting party. The quantum disruptions we're detecting suggest a full invasion force." "But you've defeated them before," Zilia said, hearing the uncertainty in her own voice. Chen turned, his expression grave. "Scout ships, yes. Individual harvesters, but never a full armada. There are limits to what even we can accomplish alone." He led her to a section of the ship where the pristine walls gave way to scorched metal and hastily repaired systems. "This damage occurred 3 weeks ago. A Herald scout nearly breached our containment fields. If they had..." He didn't need to finish the thought. Zilia ran her 6-fingered hand along the damaged bulkhead, feeling the residual heat still radiating from the metal. Everything she believed about galactic history had been a comfortable lie. "Why come to us now?" she asked. "Why break your isolation after all this time?" "Because the mathematics are undeniable," Dr. Rice interrupted, projecting a series of complex equations. "Based on their approach vector and energy signature, they'll reach Concordat space in less than 6 months. And when they do, every living thing in this sector will die. Unless we stand together." Chen's eyes met Celia's. "We need the Concordat, and the Concordat needs us, whether they believe in us or not." The Azurian High Command chamber had never felt so suffocating. Celia stood beside Captain Chen and his small diplomatic team, acutely aware of the hostile stares from every direction. The circular room's tiered seating held representatives from all 7 major Concordat species, their faces ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. "Impossible." Supreme Commander Vexer's voice echoed through the chamber, his ceremonial battle crest fully extended in a threat display rarely seen outside of historical dramas. The elderly Azurian scales had darkened to deep purple with agitation. "Humans are extinction myths, cautionary tales we tell younglings. And yet, here we stand," Captain Chen replied calmly. His small team remained composed despite the murmurs rippling through the chamber. Zilia had never imagined she would return to the capital like this, flanked by legendary creatures, presenting evidence of an existential threat. The journey had been tense, with the human shuttle escorted by a full wing of Concordat fighters, weapons locked on them the entire time. Junior Technician Zilia, Vexer turned his attention to her. All 4 eyes narrowed. "Explain how you came to be in the company of these beings." She stepped forward, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I detected an anomalous reading at Outpost Epsilon. After researching historical records, I identified it as potentially human in origin and investigated. You abandoned your post, hissed Councillor Thrix, the Morrigan representative, her feathers bristling with indignation. To make first contact with a species we believed extinct for centuries, Zelia countered, and to discover a threat approaching our territories that our sensors cannot detect. Captain Chen activated a portable projector, displaying the same horrifying footage Zelia had seen aboard the Resilience. The chamber fell silent as they watched a world die, energy draining from its surface like water from a punctured vessel. The Void Heralds approach from beyond the galactic rim, Chen explained. We've been fighting their scouts for generations while you rebuilt civilization after the Severing War. Now, a full invasion force is coming. As the footage concluded, the silence lasted precisely 3 seconds before eruption. Manufactured threats, accused Councillor Thrix. Your species has always created enemies to justify military expansion. Technological trickery, added the Pelleran representative, compound eyes flashing with electromagnetic signals to his colleagues. Historical advisors whispered urgently to council members, no doubt recounting ancient warnings about human duplicity. Political opportunists among the junior representatives visibly calculated how they might advance their positions by stoking xenophobia. Zelia watched in dismay as fear overwhelmed reason. Even the evidence before their eyes wasn't enough. Centuries of mythologizing humans had turned them into the perfect villains in the Concordat imagination. The Emergency Council voted 7-2 to reject human warnings as fabrications. Only the Centaurian and Draxid representatives dissented, urging caution and further investigation. All human vessels must depart Concordat space immediately, Vexer announced, his tone final. Any remaining after 24 hours will be considered hostile and engaged accordingly. Chen simply nodded, showing no surprise or anger. We've seen this before, he told Celia quietly as they walked to the landing pad where their shuttle waited. Around them, security forces maintained a wide perimeter, weapons ready. He pressed a small device into her hand, a quantum communicator unlike anything in Concordat technology. History repeats, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. When the first colony goes dark, use this. The empty space where the human shuttle rose left Celia feeling more alone than she'd ever been. Below, crowds had already gathered in the capital's main plaza, celebrating the expulsion of the human threat, with elaborate laser displays illuminating the skyline. That night, as Celia sat in her temporary quarters, the communicator hidden beneath her sleeping platform, she wondered how many times throughout history humans had tried to warn others, only to be rejected as monsters from children's tales. 83 days after the humans departed, Zelia stared in horror at emergency broadcasts flooding every channel. The mining outpost of Helios 9 had gone completely dark, exactly as Chen had predicted. No distress signals, no automated warnings, just silence where 8,000 lives had thrived hours before. Probable reactor malfunction, declared the official Concordat announcement. Rescue teams en route. Within 6 hours, 3 more settlements followed, each falling silent with the same terrifying abruptness. The pattern spread like a disease across the sector map, displayed on the wall of the monitoring center, where Celia had been reassigned after her reckless behavior at Outpost Epsilon. It's them, she whispered to herself, fingers hovering over the quantum communicator hidden in her pocket. It's happening. The Concordat defense fleet scrambled in disarray, vessels racing toward the affected colonies only to find empty husks where vibrant communities once stood. Buildings remained intact, machinery untouched, but every power source, from the largest reactor to the smallest battery, had been drained completely. More disturbing were the bodies, perfectly preserved, as if flash-frozen from within, expressions of confusion rather than terror marking their features. When the first Void Herald vessels materialized at the edge of core Azurian space, crystalline structures exactly matching human intelligence reports, panic erupted across 17 systems. Evacuation orders contradicted shelter-in-place commands as leadership fragmented under pressure. Zelia's supervisor grabbed her arm as alarms blared through the monitoring station. You were with them, the humans. You saw these things. What do we do? With trembling hands, Zelia finally activated the quantum communicator. The response was immediate. A soft pulse against her palm, followed by a simple message scrolling across its surface. Coordinates received. Hold position. We are coming. Spatial ruptures tore open across the defensive line, revealing dozens of human warships of various designs and ages. From sleek modern vessels to ancient behemoths bearing the scars of centuries. The Resilience led the formation, its weapon systems already engaging the first wave of heralds. From the command center were Warship summoned as the human expert. Zelia watched alongside stunned Concordat admirals as human vessels executed combat maneuvers thought physically impossible, accelerating at forces that should have crushed their occupants, pivoting in ways that defied conventional physics. They're drawing fire away from our colony ships, whispered an astonished tactical officer as human vessels deliberately placed themselves between civilian transports and the attacking heralds. The battle unfolded across 1,000 kilometers of space, human ships coordinating with an efficiency that made the Concordat fleet's formations look primitive by comparison. Energy weapons flashed between the combatants, human beams precisely targeting weak points in the herald structures that Concordat scanners couldn't even detect. 4 hours into the engagement, damage reports streamed in from both sides. The statistics were clear and sobering. For every Concordat ship lost, 5 human vessels had been destroyed. Yet they kept coming, prioritizing the protection of races that had rejected them only months before. When the last herald retreated, the battlefield fell eerily quiet. Debris from dozens of ships, mostly human, drifted silently against the backdrop of stars. Emergency transporters worked continuously, gathering survivors from damaged vessels. Aboard the Concordat command carrier, Supreme Commander Vexer watched the aftermath with mandibles clicking in agitation. His battle crest had flattened in what Zelia recognized as the physical manifestation of shame. Why would they return to help us? He finally asked, voice uncharacteristically subdued. After our rejection, after centuries of being vilified in our histories. The answer came from Captain Chen himself, his image appearing on the main screen, face streaked with blood from a wound above his eye. Because that's what humans do, he said simply. Now shall we discuss how to prepare for the main invasion force? Your ship designs are fundamentally flawed, stated the human engineer bluntly, causing several Concordat designers to bristle with indignation. The woman, Dr. Sarah Takahashi, according to her nameplate, pointed to the holographic schematics floating above the conference table. You've optimized for aesthetic symmetry at the expense of compartmentalization. One breach compromises your entire power grid. Zelia watched this cultural collision with fascination. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle, and the massive human station bulwark had been hastily repositioned to defend Concordat space. Its cavernous war room now hosted representatives from all Concordat species working alongside their human counterparts. Our vessels have won countless engagements against conventional enemies, countered Chief Designer Mazvarik, his ceremonial Azurian guild markings pulsing with barely controlled irritation. The heralds aren't conventional enemies, Dr. Takahashi replied, not unkindly. They target energy systems specifically. Your centralized design makes their job easier. Where Concordat races had specialized over millennia into rigid technological paths, humans remained adaptable generalists. Their ships reflected this philosophy, asymmetrical, practical, built for survival rather than elegance. This integration isn't proceeding as smoothly as I'd hoped, Admiral Hassan confided to Zelia as they observed another tense exchange between engineering teams. The human officer had taken command of the joint fleet, his centuries of experience making him the logical choice despite lingering Concordat resentment. 23 generations have grown up believing humans were either extinct or mythological monsters. Zelia replied, "Adjustment takes time." Hassan nodded thoughtfully. Yet some adapt quicker than others. He gestured toward a mixed group where Centaurian physicists and human weapons specialists worked in apparent harmony, equations flowing between their respective interfaces. In the strategy center, surrounded by battle planners from 17 species, Celia noticed something extraordinary. Humans deferred to Concordat experts in their specialties, rather than imposing their leadership. Morrigan navigators, whose spatial awareness was unmatched, led discussions on fleet positioning. Draxid cynobiologists, with their perfect recall, analyzed herald behavior patterns from historical encounters. "We've spent centuries studying your cultures," Captain Chen told her during a rare quiet moment, now wearing the insignia of a task force commander. They stood before a window overlooking the combined fleet, hundreds of vessels representing both human and Concordat design philosophies. "You've evolved beyond us in many ways. Yet you protected us all these years," Zelia said. Their conversation was interrupted when her data pad chimed urgently. She'd been searching restricted Concordat archives, using access codes provided by sympathetic officials. What she found sent a chill through her body. "You need to see this," she told Chen, displaying the classified files. Documented human encounters spanning decades, detailed reports of mysterious ships intervening during crises, unexplained technological leaps following the recovery of unknown debris. "Certain officials knew," she said, voice trembling with anger. "They knew humans still existed but suppressed the information." Chen studied the evidence, his expression unchanging. Political stability through shared mythology. Not the first time it's happened. But this could fracture our alliance when we need unity most, Celia argued. Before Chen could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. They rushed to the command center where holographic displays showed massive quantum disturbances forming at the edge of the system. "Herald signatures," announced the sensor operator. "More than we've ever detected. The main armada has arrived." Admiral Hassan's voice cut through the chaos with calm authority. "All personnel to battle stations. Civilian evacuation protocols in effect." As the war room erupted into coordinated activity, the quantum analysis appeared on the main screen. The approaching force was 3 times larger than their worst estimates. "Can we win this?" Zelia asked quietly, watching Chen study the tactical display. "Together," he replied. "We have to. But it will require something beyond conventional warfare." His eyes met hers with grim determination. "It's time to discuss the dimensional disruptor. It won't work without a direct neural interface," argued Dr. Eleanor Reyes, her holographic calculations spinning in the air of the war room. 2 days of continuous planning had left everyone exhausted, yet the human scientist's eyes burned with intensity. The reaction cascade requires adjustments in microseconds. Automated systems aren't fast enough. The combined fleet's plan hinged on deploying a dimensional disruptor at the heart of the Herald command structure, a device humans had been developing for decades. It would create a quantum barrier preventing Herald incursions for centuries. The problem was targeting. The neural load would kill any organic pilot, objected the Centaurian physicist, his tendrils rippling with concern. Captain Chen stepped forward before anyone could speak. "One human mind directly interfacing with the disruptor core," he said calmly. "A one-way trip." Zelia watched in awe as his crew displayed no surprise at this declaration, as if self-sacrifice was simply what humans did. Their expressions contained neither fear nor hesitation, only quiet resolution. "I volunteer," Chen continued. "I studied the Herald quantum patterns longer than anyone." Admiral Hassan opened his mouth to object, then closed it. There was understanding between the two humans, some unspoken code that transcended their personal connection. When the battle began 12 hours later, it was like nothing in recorded history. Thousands of ships engaged across an entire star system. The void filled with energy discharges and crystalline fragments as Herald structures shattered under concentrated fire. Human vessels took positions that maximized damage to the heralds while drawing fire from Concordat ships, their casualty rates mounting by the minute. The strategy was clear to Celia now. Humans placed themselves in greatest danger to protect the less durable Concordat craft. Aboard the Resilience on its final mission, Celia refused to be left behind. "My people should witness this," she insisted during the briefing. Now she stood on the bridge as the vessel accelerated toward the Herald Nexus, a massive crystalline structure coordinating the invasion force. Damage reports flooded in from across the ship. Hull breach on Deck 7. Medical responding. Power fluctuations in the main grid. Engineering reports cooling system failures in sectors 3 through 9. Chen remained focused, hands steady on the controls as they penetrated deeper into the Herald formation. The disruptor core hummed in the ship's belly, building toward critical mass. When a massive energy surge rocked the vessel, throwing crew members against bulkheads, Celia knew something had gone terribly wrong. "Direct hit to the disruptor chamber," reported the tactical officer, voice tight with controlled panic. "Containment field destabilizing. Manual override required for activation sequence." Chen immediately rose. "Seal all bulkheads between here and the core. I'm going in." Before he could leave the bridge, the young navigation officer, Ensign Maya Patil, locked eyes with him. A wordless exchange passed between them, and suddenly she was moving with startling speed. "Override code Patel 7 Delta 9. She shouted as she sprinted for the access tunnel. The emergency doors began closing behind her, too late for anyone to follow. Chen slammed his fist against the bulkhead. "Maya, no." Through the ship's internal cameras, they watched as the young woman reached the disruptor chamber. Radiation alarms blared as she manually bypassed the safety protocols, her hands moving with practiced precision, despite the energy discharges arsing around her. She looked up at the camera, her dark eyes surprisingly calm. A smile crossed her face as she gave a simple thumbs-up gesture. "Tell them we were real," came her final transmission as she connected the last circuit. The disruptor field expanded outward in a blinding wave of quantum energy, engulfing the Herald command structure. Chain reactions rippled through the crystalline fleet as their coordinating signals collapsed. Through the viewport, Celia watched the wave expand, tears streaming down her face as she witnessed humanity's ultimate demonstration that they were more than legends. They were saviors willing to sacrifice everything for species who had forgotten them. The memorial wall stretched nearly a kilometer along the newly established Earth Embassy on Azuria. 6 months after the battle, Celia, now ambassador to Earth, walked slowly along its length, watching as both humans and Azurians traced their fingers over names etched in stone and light. 3,417 human lives, murmured Admiral Hassan, who had joined her morning ritual, including 812 aboard ships that deliberately drew Herald fire away from civilian transports. The dimensional cascade, triggered by Ensign Patel's sacrifice, had created a quantum barrier that, according to human scientists, would prevent Herald incursions for at least 3 centuries. The price had been steep, but the alternative unthinkable. "Maya's family arrives tomorrow," Celia said. "I don't know what to tell them." Hassan's weathered face softened. "Tell them their daughter saved billions of lives across 17 systems. Tell them she died so others could live, which is the most human thing possible." In the 6 months since the battle, everything had changed. Human ships now openly docked at Concordat stations, their crews mixing with species who until recently thought them mythological. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and joint research initiatives flourished with remarkable speed. The greatest change, however, was philosophical. In the new Concordat Assembly Chamber, a young Morrigan representative argued passionately for the human approach to scientific education, emphasizing adaptability over specialization. The motion passed with overwhelming support. At the first Joint Military Academy, cadets from 27 species trained together under both human and Concordat instructors. The curriculum stressed flexibility, innovation, and cooperation, qualities that had proven decisive in the Herald War. Walking through the embassy gardens with Captain Chen, now Admiral Chen, having survived despite the destruction of the Resilience, Zelia paused before a simple fountain. Water flowed over a piece of crystalline material recovered from a Herald vessel, now inert and harmless. "We thought humans would be conquerors if they returned," she admitted. "We never considered you might be guardians instead." Chen smiled as they watched children from various species playing human games in the courtyard. A young Azurian and a human child collaborated to build a tower of blocks, their different numbers of fingers complementing each other's efforts. "The best part of being thought a legend," he replied, "is the chance to show who you really are." Behind them, construction began on a new class of ships bearing both Concordat and human insignia, vessels designed for exploration rather than war. The first would be named Patil, honoring the young ensign whose sacrifice had saved 2 civilizations. In the embassy archives, Celia had established a truth and reconciliation project, documenting both the centuries of human guardianship and the Concordat officials who had hidden humanity's continued existence. The revelations had toppled governments, but from the chaos emerged more transparent leadership and a commitment to historical accuracy. "What happens when the barrier fails in 3 centuries?" Zelia asked as they reached the end of the memorial wall. "Will our descendants remember how to stand together?" Chen gestured toward a group of scientists, human and Concordat, collaborating on quantum theory equations. "That's why we work together now. Neither of us alone could have defeated the Heralds. Together, we might find a permanent solution before they return." As the twin suns of Azuria began to set, casting the memorial wall in golden light, Celia reflected on how quickly myth had given way to reality. The children who once feared human monsters in bedtime stories now wore shirts emblazoned with the Earth Expeditionary Force insignia and played at being the heroes who saved the galaxy. History would remember this moment, not as the return of legendary creatures, but as the beginning of something greater. 2 civilizations discovering that neither was complete without the other, their differences becoming strengths rather than divisions. And somewhere among the stars, Celia knew Ensign Maya Patel would be smiling at what her sacrifice had made possible. Humans were indeed real, and so much more than legends had ever suggested.